UFC 302 Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier is on this weekend, and in this video I'll be giving you my full predictions and breakdown for every single fight on the card, and I will be predicting all the best moments on the card. Kicking it off with Mitch Raposo versus Andre Lima. Now, this fight is hard to actually judge because when you look at both of their careers, aside from their UFC associated fights, they've both only fought cans. I mean, they're both pretty young into their careers. One's only got 10 fights, the other's only got 8 fights. But when you look at towards like around their 5th or 6th fights in their careers, they're literally fighting guys that are 0-1, 1-1. They've basically had no MMA fights. So it's hard to judge how good they both actually are. But when we look at them specifically, when we look at Raposo, he's got pretty nice technical boxing. He's pretty decent on the front foot, but he's actually good on the back foot as well. He pops pretty nice 1-2s. He did that in Dana White's Contender Series against Jake Hadley. And Jake Hadley is a pretty good flyweight, especially in comparison. I mean, Jake Hadley's had decent opposition. He's had a fair few fights, a lot of gritty fights as well, and he puts on a lot of forward pressure. He's a very forward pressure-oriented fighter, whereas Raposo was actually able to outland him a lot of the time when he was on the back foot. And when we look at Raposo as well, he has great timing on his level changes too. He's a state champion wrestler. And when you look at this matchup specifically, Lima doesn't have the submission threat there. He's got 0 submissions. He's a pretty decent, from what I've seen, he's a pretty decent kickboxer, a technical, accurate kickboxer, but he doesn't have any submission threat. So if Raposo, which he should do, if he can get the fight to the ground, then he's in a very, very good position. And when we look at Raposo again, I mean, he's had that more UFC-based experience overall because he's not only fought on Dana White's Contender Series against Jake Hadley, which, yes, he lost, but he's also fought on Tough, which he didn't do too well in, but I mean, he was in Tough with Team Volkanovski, and I mean, Volkanovski has a very good team around him, and you know that's very valuable to have in terms of the learnings that he would have gotten, especially for a fighter this young into his career. It's definitely something to take from, and it's definitely, for them being this young, it's definitely an attribute that we need to look at in terms of going into this fight. And yeah, I mean, he's actually pretty decent. I mean, when you look at him, mainly we have to go off that Jake Hadley fight. Yes, he did lose by submission, but he was ultimately winning on the feet, and just the 1-2, he was popping it all the time, especially on the back foot. And if Andre Lima is able to get him on the back foot, then he could probably still contend with him, but I do probably prefer Lima on the feet overall. He does seem to have very nice kickboxing, and he is very accurate. And he does have the reach advantage in this fight. He's got about 2-3 inch reach advantage in this one. And I do think if it does stay on the feet, I think his accuracy will then be too much for Raposo to actually take on. But if Raposo can then time his entries and rely more on his wrestling, I think that he will actually grind out the decision, and I think he'll take it by that decision win. Moving up to Ailin Perez versus Joselyne Edwards. Now, it's interesting with this one because both of them actually have beef with each other. They did get into a bit of a scuffle at the UFC PI sometime last year. Don't exactly remember when, but I do mention that because it'll be interesting to see if the emotions get the better of either one of them in the fight. Because if the emotions get the better of someone, then it can often lead to them overcommitting to strikes and just making mistakes in general. So it will be fascinating to see if that actually does come into play. But when we look at Perez, she has a pretty decent ground game. But I'd say in terms of her ground game, it's not really her takedowns, it's her transitions on the ground. I think she almost hits about 5 takedowns a fight on average, and she is very strong. When we look at her fight against Kopylov, she pretty much ragdolled her, especially through the first and second round. She was ragdolling her with her strength. It looked like they were supposed to be in different weight classes, in all honesty. And the most impressive thing about it is how often she was actually able to transition safely and easily to full mount. And when you look at someone like Joselyne Edwards, she is someone that gets reversed so bloody easily in fights. If you look back at her last couple fights, actually, if you look back at her fight against, I believe it was Kopylov, she gets reversed a bunch of times in that fight. And if it's against someone like Ailin Perez that has that strength and has that transitional advantage, then that's going to cause a very big issue in terms of ground and pound opportunities for Ailin Perez. So yeah, Edwards does definitely need to keep this on the feet. And Edwards, when we look at her, she does have the reach advantage. She's got 4-inch reach advantage, and she is a bit cleaner on the feet. But when it comes to the feet as well, though, for Edwards, I just don't think she's that fast. And it's not even with her strike speed. I think it's also a reaction time to her defense as well. She's just not very, she is aware, but she just doesn't, she's not able to actually defend strikes very well. And a lot of them just pop through her guard. So she does absorb a lot of strikes overall. So very similar to the last fight, Edwards has the advantage on the feet, but I don't think she'll be able to stuff Perez's takedowns. And her being pretty poor transitionally, I mean, you look at her against in the UFC Fight Night in Paris, Cornell. She was landing the takedowns, but then she got reversed pretty much every single time it got to the ground. And that's against a Muay Thai fighter. Cornell is a Muay Thai fighter, not a ground game expert, whereas Perez is more accustomed to the ground game. So that just makes it even more evident that if this fight gets to the ground, then Ailin Perez is just going to have so much more of an advantage. And I think she will get it to the ground. And I think she will be able to grind out a decision win there. But Perez isn't known for her submissions. She's more known for a controlled ground and pound. So I see her either getting that decision or possibly a late TKO if she manages that full mount for a good amount of time. But I would more so probably edge it towards a decision. Moving up to Gall versus Bassil Hafez. I don't see this fight going well for Gall. I honestly think he's going to get chinned. He's been out for 2 years. This is a terrible return fight for him. I don't know exactly why he took this. I mean, you look at him, he's been out for 2 years. He got chinned by Mike Malott, slept badly, folded like a lawn chair. And you look at Bassil Hafez. He's coming off a now top 5 welterweight loss to Jack Della Maddalena, which was definitely a controversial fight. And going from an in-form, momentum-driven Jack Della Maddalena to a 2-year laid-off Gall is exactly what you want to bounce back if you are Bassil Hafez. I mean, I think this is a golden opportunity for Bassil Hafez, honestly. When we look at them in terms of their stylistic matchups, both of them have never been submitted. But to Gall's defense, I would give him that jiu-jitsu advantage overall. But I would give Hafez that wrestling advantage. And when you look at their records, especially in terms of their KOs, TKOs, Gall has no KO power. He has no KO power, and he's not going to be taking out a fighter like Hafez. Hafez ate 300,000 shots from Jack Della Maddalena, and I don't think he even got dropped. He got wobbled 20 times, but he did not get dropped. And Hafez has never been finished before, KOs or submissions, and he has a chin, is extremely durable. He looks absolutely juiced, and if a crisp boxer like JDM can't finish him, then I'm honestly not giving Gall any chance. I mean, a 1% chance, obviously it is MMA, but realistically, there's no chance. If he can, the way that Gall wins this fight is if he can somehow get Hafez's back, then he has the best chance to use his best weapon that he has, which is obviously his rear naked choke. He has got 6 out of 7 of his wins with the rear naked choke. So basically every single win he has is with a rear naked choke. So if he can somehow get his back, then there is a likelihood that he could submit him. But the likelihood of that happening with how explosive Hafez is in terms of getting out of bad situations when it comes to that ground game, and he's wrestling oriented anyway. He's an absolute freak when it comes to wrestling. Justin Gaethje had huge props for him as well, stating that he's an absolute machine in the gym. And when you look at that fight against JDM, I mean, he gave JDM the hardest fight of his career so far, harder than the Gilbert Burns fight for sure. And I mean, he just looks like a juiced up freight train. He's huge. And he's got that strength. He's very powerful. He does have, I mean, Jack Della Maddalena has a pretty good chin. And I mean, he was snapping JDM's head back. And if he does that to Mickey Gall, he's ripping Mickey Gall's head off. I honestly am definitely going to be seeing this one as a first, second round KO finish, and I think it's going to be brutal. It's just it's not the right option for Mickey Gall to take coming back into it after a two-year layoff. Moving on to Phil Rowe versus Jake Matthews. Now, I think this fight is one of the ones that is harder to predict on the card. When you look at Phil Rowe, he clearly has the physical advantages. He's 4 inches taller. He's got a 7.5-inch reach advantage as well. And he does have pretty crisp counter striking. And I mean, that's very good when you have a reach of have a 7.5-inch reach advantage, especially when you've got people that have that shorter reach and they're really having to come to really get inside to get any shots off. And if you've got that counter striking there, then they're coming into your punches. And yeah, so that is definitely an advantage for Phil Rowe in this department. But there is an issue with Phil Rowe in terms of when he is moving backwards, he takes a lot of damage. He takes shots. He just doesn't have good defense when he's on the back foot, and he doesn't really pressure forward that often. And when you look at, well, literally, as we're talking about Nico Price just before, Nico Price was finding a lot of success against Phil Rowe in their fight in that first to second round that they had, and he wobbled Phil Rowe badly as well. I think it was in the second round. And I think if you have someone like Jake Matthews, who I think is a bit more technical in his striking, is just a bit more composed and tidy, I think he can capitalize on those situations a lot better than Nico Price can. And I mean, I feel like he could do a lot more damage overall and could possibly get Phil Rowe out of there if it comes to Phil Rowe not tightening up that defense if he is on the back foot. And even with that reach advantage that Phil Rowe has, I just like Jake Matthews striking overall, whether he's on the back foot or on the front foot, pardon me. And yeah, it's just, I think that's just down to Jake Matthews' composure overall. He has doubled the experience, or about double the experience that Phil Rowe has in MMA, and he's just started at such a young age, and he went through Tough Nations, I believe it was Tough Nations, in the Australia versus Canada series, and ever since then he's been in the UFC literally ever since, and he was about 20 or 21 years old then, so he's been in the UFC for such a long time. He's only 29 years old, so there's a lot of learning for him there, and he's fought good opponents. I mean, he's coming off a competitive loss to Michael Morales, who I think definitely will be a welterweight problem in the future. He was only 24. He's only 24 or 25 years old, and he is very crisp with his striking overall. And I honestly think that if you're going from Michael Morales to Phil Rowe, I mean, that's almost a refresher in itself, because Michael Morales is definitely better than Phil Rowe. And when you look at Jake as well, he has a chin. I mean, he's only been finished once by KO TKOs, and he's just pretty sound defensively on the feet as well. And he himself has pretty good counter-striking too. And I think one of the biggest keys, not only when it comes to like Phil Rowe and his striking defense, I think the key issue for Phil Rowe is he is complacent. He has complacency issues. He is composed, but he tends to let fights slip by absorbing those unnecessary strikes, and then he doesn't really capitalize on it. He's very much like a maximum 3-piece combo and then just resets. Like, he doesn't really capitalize that much from the fights that I've seen. And I honestly do think that Jake Matthews can drag this into the later rounds after kind of figuring each other out a bit. And I think that he'll be able to find a finish, especially if he lands that lead left hook that he has. He times his lead left hook very well. And if Phil Rowe decides to come forward and Jake Matthews has that counter, that check left hook, then I think that could possibly be an option to be taking him out. But I do think it will more likely be a Jake Matthews decision, which I do think it could even be a split decision, to be honest. It's a very hard fight to pick. I know I've been shitting on Phil Rowe a fair bit in this prediction, but Phil Rowe, he does have those physical advantages. He does have clean striking. He is technical, and he does have a bit of power there. I mean, he's 6-1 when it comes to KO TKOs. So yeah, there is that possibility for either of them to get taken out, but I would think it would be more of a decision for either of them. And honestly, I just think when it comes to that experience and that like the damage output and just like the overall KO TKO power and the lack of striking defense from Phil Rowe, I just think that Jake Matthews will get the decision in this one. Moving on to Grant Dawson versus Joe Solecki. Now, this fight this one's a very odd one to predict. I mean, they are both extremely crafty on the ground. And both of them they're pretty much mirror matched in terms of their fighting style, and both of them they're both mirrored in terms of their what's happened recently in terms of their careers. Both of them are coming off pretty brutal first round KO losses. Solecki's coming off a loss against Drakkar Klose when he got slammed on his head, and then Dawson is obviously coming off that Bobby Green loss as well, where he lost in the first 30 seconds of the fight. Now, I do think, though, obviously you see Grant Dawson is much more of a favourite at -250 compared to a 205. I do think that the odds in this fight should be a bit closer, but I do think that they are right in terms of picking Grant Dawson as the favourite. I do think Grant Dawson will take this win. He does have the physical advantages and has more career experience against better opposition overall as well. And he has more finishes just overall by both KO and submissions. And he has vicious chokes as well. Most of his wins are by rear naked chokes. He has very good control. He has a good wrestling base as well. But I don't think he will be able to submit Solecki. But I do genuinely think he will be able to control him effectively and secure those advantageous positions when he's transitioning through those grappling exchanges. And I think when he's transitioning through those grappling exchanges, I think that will allow him to land better shots and secure that control time, which I think if you're adding all that up together and he's got that control and he's getting those advantageous positions, I just don't think Joe Solecki's going to have a lot of answers for that. So I do think that Grant Dawson's going to pull out the decision in that one. Moving on to our feature prelim, Cesar Almeida versus Roman Kopylov. I think one way or another, one of these guys are going to get folded like an absolute bloody lawn chair. I think this is a recipe for disaster, to be honest. I mean, obviously for either one of them, it's fantastic for us. But when you look at them, both of them have amazing kickboxing and brutal KO power as well. And they have the speed to go along with it as well. But I am going to go with Kopylov in this fight for a few reasons. Kopylov has a lot more MMA experience. And I think his key to victory is mixing in the level changes to keep Almeida guessing to then disrupt his striking. I don't think Almeida has that in his arsenal. He pretty much has no ground game threat at all. I mean, he's only 5-0 in MMA, and he does have pretty good get-ups and takedown defense, but we're not looking for Kopylov to actually go for the takedown. We're looking for him to feint with the takedown, so then it opens up that striking and, opens up that posture and removes him from that very, defensively sound kickboxing guard that Almeida has. And if we can take away from that and Kopylov can find an opening, I mean, if you give Kopylov an opening, he's going to rip your head off. I mean, we've seen that in literally, aside from the fluffy fight that he lost, we've seen it in the last 3 or 4 fights that he's had. But, I mean, when you look at Kopylov, he is a striker first and foremost, and he doesn't have any submission wins. But as I said, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the feints. We're not looking for the actual takedowns. But you also got to remember he is a 5-time combat sambo world champion, so there is an aspect there, I'm sure, in terms of that wrestling pedigree. But I mean, it just seems that he just loves the striking. So, and he's obviously fantastic at it. But when we look at Cesar Almeida, he is a world-class kickboxer, and he did take out Alex Pereira. It was by a decision, I'm pretty sure. But I mean, if you're going hand-in-hand with Alex Pereira, we all know Alex Pereira. He's just an absolute freak at kickboxing. So, I mean, that just kind of speaks for itself in terms of the caliber of striking that Almeida has. But he has no offensive ground game. He pretty much has nothing there in terms of anything offensively, but he does have that decent takedown defense and those get-ups. But I think if Kopylov is utilizing those feints, which I don't think Kopylov would bite on if Almeida was doing it, I think because Cesar just doesn't have the submission threat there that Kopylov would be concerned about, and he's just come off a fight against Fluffy Hernandez, which Fluffy is very, very good on the ground, and the submission pedigree is not even close between Cesar Almeida and Fluffy Hernandez. So Kopylov hopefully would have learned a lot from that last fight, and hopefully would be more defensively sound in terms of the submission threat, which I don't think he would need in this fight. But yeah, I think Kopylov, I think he feints in this fight. I think he feints for the takedown and then finds an opening. And I think that he gets a brutal KO finish in the second or third round. And also on top of that, Cesar Almeida, as a kickboxer, he is pushing 36 years of age at middleweight. And I understand that they basically are a pick'em fight, but I am going to edge it to Kopylov just out of, that possibility of that opportunity to feint there, use some combat sambo, get him to the ground, and just having that overall experience too. Moving on to the main card, Randy Brown versus Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. Now, this one's another difficult fight to predict. When you look at Elizeu, he took almost 2 years off after his Benoit Saint Denis fight, which he won. He did a fantastic job. The technical striking advantage there over Benoit Saint Denis was incredible. Just absolutely beat the living shit out of him. And I mean, he's looked good since fighting Benoit Saint Denis, even after that 2-year period that he took off. He fought Ranit Fakhretdinov, who Ranit is on like a 20 or 21 fight win streak, and he showed so much heart in that fight. And Ranit was then, I'm not sure if he is now exactly, I believe he is, he's ranked 15, so it was literally a ranked contender fight, and he showed, amazing heart. He was fantastic. He shows a lot of willpower in his fights, and he got dropped in the first 30 seconds of that fight badly by Ranit, and then he came back, used his boxing fantastically well, and almost finished Ranit with a liver shot. It was like a teep to the liver in the last minute, and almost got him out of there and almost got a ranking position. But they both got the draw, which I'd probably say is actually fair enough. It was a ridiculously close fight. But yeah, honestly, with Elizeu, you can never honestly count him out of a fight. I think he's aging like fine wine. He's getting better with age. His boxing combinations are extremely clean, and he just doesn't seem to wane through his fights. Like his cardio just is fairly consistent, at least through 3-round fights, which is pretty weird considering his age, but that's just more to the point where I think he is just aging like fine wine. And then when we look at Randy Brown, he's won 4 of his last 5 fights, aside from the Jack Della Maddalena fight, where I do think he got a little bit too overconfident in that fight, but I think regardless, I think JDM would have taken it. He's just got that striking, especially that boxing advantage over Randy Brown, and very, very good takedown defense as well, which JDM has. And I think Randy Brown had to get that fight to the ground, which I just don't think he was really going to be able to get JDM down. And that's similar to this fight as well. I think Randy Brown will really need to get this fight to the ground, because I genuinely think Elizeu has the striking advantage here, especially in that boxing range. I think Randy Brown's in trouble if it's in boxing range. Randy Brown has to utilize the jabs. He needs to disrupt the boxing of Elizeu
in any way, shape, or form possible. Whether it's taking him down, whether it's ripping to the body to lower his hands, or popping the jab to disrupt his combinations. He just needs to do any of that. He needs to keep on that as much as he can. Whatever he can do to remove that boxing threat, he needs to do. Because I honestly do prefer Elizeu in that striking game, even though Randy Brown does have the 5-inch reach advantage. Yeah, I like him on the feet overall, ultimately. But when we look at the ground game, Randy does have the submission advantage there, but that's whether he can actually get it to the ground or not is another thing. Like Elizeu, he does have pretty decent takedown defense, and I do think that Brown will need to drop him to get him there, but that's going to be an issue because I think Elizeu just has that better striking overall. He manages his distance very well, and I just think that Randy Brown's going to find that to be a pretty uphill task. And I honestly would be pretty comfortable. I mean, I'm not comfortable in this fight, to be honest. I mean, both of them, it's very even. I honestly think it should be a little closer in the odds, even closer to a pick'em, to be honest. But I do think that it's not a crazy shout to say that Elizeu could get a late TKO, but I think that it's more likely that he will get a decision win in this fight. I just think that boxing rhythm and his ability to stuff those takedowns, I just think it's going to be a little bit too much for Randy Brown. I don't think Randy Brown's going to be in a heap of danger in terms of getting finished, but I just don't think that Randy Brown's going to be able to get the fight where he wants to actually get it. And I mean, especially on the ground, because if you've got Elizeu who's stuffing 8 out of 9 of Ranit Fakhretdinov's takedown attempts, then I think he's going to be able to stuff Randy Brown. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a close fight, but I'm going to be taking Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos by a decision win here. Moving up to the fan favorite, Jailton Almeida versus Alexandr Romanov. Similar to the Dawson and Solecki fight, both of them are ground game experts, which is definitely rare in terms of heavyweight fights. I mean, when you look at them in terms of them matching up, I honestly think both of them should be at light heavyweight, not heavyweight. I think they both need to move down. They're both sit around the 220 to 230 pounds. Romanov, I mean, he might struggle a little bit to get down to light heavyweight, but I think if he could, I think that strength that he has could do a lot of damage. And that's the same with Jailton Almeida. Jailton Almeida looked amazing at light heavyweight. I don't know why he ever moved up, to be honest. I think just maybe that submission threat he could get away with, but I think if he's going anywhere near the top 5, I honestly think most of them are going to destroy him. And that's the same with Romanov as well. I just don't think Romanov is agile enough unless he cuts that weight and then he goes down to light heavyweight. But when you look at them in this fight, I think whoever is able to transition to the back successfully first is most likely just going to either drag it out or get a choke submission win. Both of them are very good with submissions. Between them, they've got 21 submission wins. And between the both of them specifically, they have 16 choke wins in their pro careers. Now, they both haven't fought someone as good as each other when it comes to the grappling department, though, in MMA specifically. But the main issue I see in this matchup for Romanov is that can he get Almeida onto the ground? Because, I mean, Almeida's going to have that speed advantage for sure. He's just got that build. He's got that agile build in comparison to Romanov. And I do think Romanov does have that ability to KO him in the first round. If he gets the right shot off, I'd give Romanov the KO power advantage over Jailton Almeida, but it's whether he can even land the shot on Almeida and get him down because of that speed difference overall. I think, especially when you look on the ground as well, Almeida being so fast and agile and having that body type, if Romanov isn't straight in top control, I think Almeida's just going to have a field day when it comes to those transitions, because that transition speed in comparison to Romanov is just going to be so much quicker. And if it is, and they get to the ground, he's just going to be in more favorable positions to attack submissions, get some decent ground and pound, and ultimately just grind out the fight. But yeah, as I said, though, there is that chance for Romanov. Definitely, I think he's definitely the more dangerous of the two when it comes to the KO power. But when you see Romanov's last couple fights, when you look at his fight against Tybura, he gasses out pretty quickly as well. So that's just going to lead to Almeida being able to get the takedown even easier, because Almeida's not going to gas near as quick as Romanov is. No way, unless he's just being completely insufficient with his energy. I just don't see it happening. He's just has a higher fitness quality. He's just better accustomed than Romanov is. But honestly, yeah, I'm struggling to see where Romanov is going to get the absolute better of this fight compared to Almeida. Just maybe out of pure strength, but even Almeida is very strong, in all honesty. I mean, he was ragdolling Curtis Blades in that first round. And when you look at Romanov, he doesn't have very good takedown defense as well. I mean, he gets taken down pretty easily. So I honestly think that Almeida will probably get a late submission in this one. Moving up to Kevin Holland versus Michal Oleksiejczuk. Now, Kevin Holland loves having fun in the octagon, loves having fun in his fights, but I do honestly think he'll want to wrap this one up pretty quickly. I just don't think there is a huge gain for him in terms of that entertainment factor. I mean, Michal, he's got KO power, but he just isn't a big name. I mean, he's 3-3 in his last 6. He's kind of filling a void for Kevin Holland, I think. And when you look at Holland, Holland is just so seasoned. He's so ridiculously active in the UFC. He has very nice kickboxing. He's a lot more rangy. He has that physical advantage in terms of, obviously being the length. I mean, he has a 7-inch reach advantage, and he has fought way better opposition than Michal has in his career. I mean, it's not even close, realistically. And Holland is coming off a loss against Michael Venom Page, who is so much more technical and is just way better than Michal Oleksiejczuk. And I think that this is just a nice refresher for Kevin Holland. And his power generates very well into middleweight anyway. So I think, I think it's just going to be a struggle for Michal, especially like even on the feet, it's going to be tricky, but on the ground, it's just death for him, I think. Michal, when we look at Michal, though, I mean, he definitely has the power on his side. I think he could possibly actually edge the power overall towards him, especially with his left hand. He's a southpaw. He does have a pretty nice left hand to power left, but he needs to get the fight on the inside, and Kevin Holland can definitely capitalize on, counter striking. He has decent counter striking as a kickboxer. I mean, he has a kung fu base, but he does have nice kickboxing. And Kevin Holland has very stiff hands. It's very similar to those lengthier fighters. They just have very the way they strike. It's very stiff, but it just generates so much power. It's like a piercing shot. Fighter that definitely has that is like Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira. It's like when they hit, it just looks like the shot is going through them. And Kevin Holland has that type of power. He has that type of shot. It's a very stunning kind of shot. And I think that he can definitely catch Michal coming in for a flurry in terms of trying to get inside and trying to take out Kevin Holland. And yeah, I honestly think, aside from Michal trying to get off that power shot, I don't think there's anything else he can do. I think that's all he seriously can do against Kevin Holland. And Holland is just so much more well-rounded. He's got the KO power, and most importantly, in terms of his matchups, I mean, in terms of this matchup specifically, he's just so versatile with his submission game. He's secured rear naked chokes, guillotines, triangle chokes, Darce chokes, rip Michael Chiesa, throughout his career. And when you look at Michal, he doesn't have great takedown defense or submission defense. Definitely not. I mean, he's 1-5 with submissions, and he's lost by a range of submissions in his career as well. So I mean, that versatility from Kevin Holland is a detriment to Michal Oleksiejczuk. So I honestly think overall, I think Holland's just going to be able to outwork him on the feet, and then I think he can successfully level change if he needs to. But I think he will hurt Oleksiejczuk badly coming in on the feet, and then I think he will submit him later in the fight, probably around the second round, possibly early third round. But yeah, honestly, the experience, the physical advantages, and the overall well-roundedness is just gonna get Holland the fight won pretty easily, to be honest. Moving on to our co-main event, Sean Strickland versus Paulo Costa. If there is not a mid-fight trash talk, I'm going to be extremely disappointed. But overall, I've got Strickland winning via press conference anyway. I think Strickland is, just with Paulo Costa's broken English, I just think Sean Strickland's just going to absolutely fucking ruin him. It's just going to be very fascinating to see what the hell Strickland pulls out of his ass in terms of just everything he says. And Costa will just have, I can just see it now, Costa's just going to have some responses that are going to make absolutely no sense. And people are just going to struggle to hear what he says. But overall, I mean, it's going to be, I think it's going to be a fantastic fight, just stylistically, and the way these guys just have, I mean, it's not even their fighting styles, it's just their charisma, it's the way they both hold themselves to a certain standard and everything, and they're both trained like absolute animals. Like, when you look at them stylistically, I mean, I think this fight will most likely stay on the feet. And as much as I do love Costa, Strickland's fight style is just not a good matchup for him, to be honest. Strickland is more well-rounded than Costa, and he's very defensively sound. I mean, we saw that against Israel Adesanya, and Costa almost has more of this brawler style with some mixed spinny shit that he has. I mean, he almost decapitated Robert Whittaker with about his spinning heel kick, I believe it was. And Strickland, when you look at Strickland, though, you got to really account for that well-roundedness. He has a very good ground game. He's got the ground game advantage, and I don't think Strickland will be able to hold Costa down, but the problem is this fight is 5 rounds. It just plays so heavily into Sean Strickland's game, and I think if it gets past the 3rd round into the 4th or 5th, Sean Strickland will then really be able to start holding Costa down if it does get there. And it's just going to get easier and easier and easier for Sean Strickland to drag out a decision. Like, when you're looking at those championship rounds, that's Strickland's home compared to Paulo Costa. And that's just down to his style. I mean, Strickland is so economic with his style. He's got the reach advantage as well. And I mean, you look at the exchanges, Costa's just going to have to make this one dirty. Like, you look at Strickland against Adesanya, he was able to outplay Adesanya completely. And if he can outplay Adesanya with Adesanya's bloody kickboxing level, his pedigree, I think it's just going to be such a long day for Costa on the feet if he doesn't make this messy. And I mean, the biggest thing, though, when you compare Adesanya to Paulo Costa for Sean Strickland, the thing that Adesanya does not have, that Costa definitely has, is that bullish, juiced Ricky Martin strength and aggression. Costa, honestly, he just has to pressure Strickland so hard for as much of the fight as he can. He needs to pressure him back, he needs to put Strickland on the back foot. If he lets Strickland get that forward pressure going, and Strickland starts unleashing that jab, it's not going to be good. It's seriously not going to be good. Costa needs to make it as scrappy as possible, because the longer the fight goes, the more it's just going to play into Strickland's game. I mean, Costa looked extremely good against Robert Whittaker, but we've seen him gas pretty quickly in a lot of his fights, like he did against Vettori and Luke Rockhold, which, yes, I know he fought Luke Rockhold at Salt Lake City, which is a higher altitude, so it's not really a fair comparison. But that was also down to Paulo Costa's preparation too. I mean, he was doing a lot of fucking around when it came to Luke Rockhold. But if Costa does have a very good weight cut, like he did against Whittaker, I can see this being a lot more competitive, to be honest. But going back to Strickland and his jab, Strickland literally has one of the best jabs in MMA. And Costa isn't known for having very good strike defense. But just being an MMA fight, I do see Costa having that very good chance if he does make the fight a complete dogfight. But I don't think he'll be able to break down Strickland. But there is that possibility that he could knock Strickland the fuck out. Like, there is that possibility there for sure. He does have power. He does have the aggression there. And he does have that over Strickland. Strickland is not as aggressive. Obviously, that comes down to his fight style. But he also just does... I don't think he has the KO power that Paulo Costa does have. And yeah, like, he just has to make it a dog fight. But Strickland is going to make that very difficult for Paulo Costa to execute, because Strickland is just so composed. And overall, I think Strickland will take this one by a decision. It's either Strickland lands a ridiculous amount of strikes over 5 rounds and gets a decision, which I think is more likely. I don't think he will finish Paulo Costa, though. I think Costa is just so stupidly durable. His neck is like as big as my fucking thighs. He's just, it's going to be so, unless he gets clipped over the temple or something like that, I just don't see him getting hit around the neck or jaw area or chin and him getting flatlined, just especially against someone like Sean Strickland. I don't see that happening. But if you look at Costa, I mean, he's got that KO power chance. If he gets him in an exchange, especially with those sneaky, unorthodox strikes like that spinning heel kick he did have against Whitaker, if he gets him with something like that, he could definitely knock him out. So definitely do not count out Paulo Costa for sure, but I do think these odds are fair. And I think when you're looking at those odds, I think from a betting perspective, I think that betting on Strickland by a decision is probably the best way to go here. Moving on to the main event, Dustin by Gilly. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe. No, I'm just kidding. When it comes to Islam versus Poirier, main event, I mean, fantastic main event. When you look at them, I mean, we'll look at Dustin first. I mean, it would just be amazing if Dustin could have his swan song going out on top with the belt. It would be fantastic. And I truly think, whether he wins it or not, I think he does retire after this fight. I mean, he has nothing else to prove aside from actually winning that belt in UFC, just in MMA, to be honest. And I mean, it's getting more and more evident. I mean, you look at the media coverage, you look at the interviews, and he does seem pretty set on retiring after this. I think it's pretty obvious. You can just picture it when it comes to the post-fight speech, whether he wins or loses. I just would not be surprised if he just goes off. I don't see why. He's not even interested in Conor anymore, so it's that money fight. He doesn't need money, I don't think, to be honest. He's pretty well off. So I do think when it comes to this matchup specifically, I think that mindset, I think that's where the major issue lies for him. And like, not only just Islam's skill set, but I think that kind of idea that he's already got 1 foot out the door, he's got that mindset of having 1 foot out the door, it just shows that he's not necessarily as committed, which I think only makes it easier for Islam to actually take this fight. I mean, anywhere on the ground and at that kickboxing range, Islam has the clear advantage there. And I would say it's close when it comes to the clinch game, but I would honestly give that to Islam too. I mean, he had brutal knees that he was landing on Volk in both their fights. And I honestly see the only avenue where Poirier actually wins is playing the exact strategy that he played against Benoit Saint-Denis. Except, obviously, do not jump guard for a guillotine. As much as we all want it. Just, obviously don't jump guard for a guillotine. Poirier needs to draw Islam into the exchanges and take him into a boxing range like he did like against Benoit Saint-Denis. Poirier had himself against the cage, drew him in for the exchanges, and then teed off with his boxing. And, I mean, if both of them are at boxing range, I can honestly say with confidence, if they are both at boxing range and they are exchanging, Dustin will knock Islam out. But Islam just is not stupid enough to keep it there. Boxing is the boxing range, and Islam's boxing is the weakest part of his game. I mean, maybe aside from him being on his back, but I mean, when the hell are we ever seeing that except for round 5 of his first fight with Volk? I don't see. I would be very surprised if Poirier gets him there, unless Poirier drops him on his ass. And yeah, I mean, you look at Islam. Islam has so many better tools to use than boxing. He's got the kickboxing. He's got the sambo. He does not need to take it to that boxing range. And Islam, I mean, looking at the media coverage, you look at him through the all the UFC like fight series, like embedded series and all that. I mean, he looks very locked in, and he's clearly not underestimating Dustin Poirier at all. He said he doesn't want him to retire. And I mean, he sees him, you can clearly tell that he does see him as a threat. And I mean, that just plays more into Islam's favor. And when you look at Poirier, I mean, if Dustin Poirier does jump guard, it's a 50-50 shot at best. I mean, if he cinches the guillotine, then he obviously wins. But if he doesn't, he gives up top control to Islam. And if he gives up top control to Islam, it's basically game over for him. I honestly, I don't think this fight plays out much differently to the Khabib-Poirier fight, but I think Islam submits Poirier in round 2 instead of round 3 like Khabib did. Islam's stand-up is so much more dangerous than Khabib's, and I just think it gives Dustin more to worry about overall. I honestly think it'll be a Hail Mary for Dustin Poirier for him to get this win. And I think Islam will get him out of there with either an arm triangle or a guillotine in around round 2. And moving up to our fight card awards, kicking it off with fight of the night, got to give it to Strickland versus Costa. I mean, just having that fine mix of Strickland's output and his clean boxing against Costa's durability and Costa's if Costa especially makes it a scrappy fight, then, I mean, it's just going to be a huge clash of styles and someone's going to take a lot of damage. It's going to be either way. I mean, with Strickland's volume or Costa's power, someone is going to be taking a lot of damage. And I mean, Costa's got that durability there to, have the fight play out a lot longer. So I think that plays more into it being fight of the night instead of a finish of the night. So yeah, I do see Costa getting very frustrated and making it extremely scrappy. And I think it'll be the fan favorite fight of the night, to be honest. I think this is a lot of fans' fight of the night, to be honest. I think this is what a lot of people are keen for, even over the Islam and Dustin fight, to be honest. I'm pretty even myself. Like, I'm keen for both of them, but I think a lot of people, especially like the people that are very into the trash talk and just want to see an absolute shit show, I think this is just definitely the fight for them. And when we go into the performance of the night, Islam Makhachev, it's just hard to see many people being able to stop Islam in general, to be honest. And I think if Charles and Khabib were able to get Dustin Poirier out of there with their submission threats, I think Islam is just going to be able to put on a show against Dustin Poirier. I think Islam will face a bit of adversity in the first round. Like, definitely am not stupid enough to count Dustin Poirier out. I think that Dustin definitely has that chance, and those odds should not be that far out. I think Dustin should be about $3, not $5. But when you look at the adversity that he could possibly face, I think it's just going to turn Islam on. I think when it comes to that second round, I think he's just going to take Poirier out. Moving up to the fighter to watch, I'm going to give it to Bassil Hafez. Honestly, I think this is a golden opportunity for him. He's already been on notice after that controversial loss to JDM, who is now in the top 5. And yeah, when you're looking at this fight being that golden opportunity, I think he honestly steamrolls Mickey Gall and puts on one of the best performances on the card. And I think if he does steamroll Mickey Gall, I think he'll get a pretty close matchup to a top 15 position after this. Now, moving on to finish of the night, I'm going to give it to Roman Kopylov. I just definitely, in part with the matchup itself, is why I'm giving this. I mean, both don't offer much offensive ground threat and are absolute killers on the feet, so it's just that recipe for disaster there. And I think with Kopylov's MMA experience, and if he does use those level change feints, I think he will be able to open up Almeida and get that brutal KO finish. With Islam Makhachev headlining UFC 302, if you haven't already, you can just check here on the screen. I've got the what if every UFC champion fought for double champ status. That is where I talk about, in part, Islam fighting Ilia Topuria if Ilia Topuria is to move up for double champ status, and then Islam Makhachev moving up to fight Leon Edwards for double champ status. So yeah, if you've enjoyed the video as well, please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.